Good evening, Andy, and welcome all to part 11, I believe it is now, Andy, of our Football Book podcast with Andy from myfootballbooks.com and me. How are you, pal? You okay?
I'm very good, thank you. Yeah, very good. Long time no speak. It's the first time this year, isn't it? So, It's incredible. It's already the end of February.
I know, it's crazy.
Where's that time gone?
I don't know, but I've had one day off since New Year's Day. It's been crazy. And I know
did you enjoy that day off reading, did you?
No, you know me. I just don't have time. The amount of people that say to me, "What are you reading now?" And well, I ain't reading nothing. I've got hundreds and hundreds of football books, but I just don't get time to read them. That's why I like to make the podcast with you, because we can talk about them, and I find talking easier than reading. Before we do get into podcast, let's have a little bit about myfootballbooks.com and how your concept has grown from a project in lockdown to now absolutely massive, mate. Well done.
Thank you very much. Yeah, almost 2 years or so down the line. I forget exactly then, but thank you for the introduction. And the website is myfootballbooks.com. Which till someone tells me otherwise, is the largest online football book only website in the world. So I'm across the various social media channels, Twitter, where just recently we've got to over 10,000 followers, just on Twitter alone, but also on Facebook and Instagram. And basically the website is, it's a series of recommended football books covering all areas of a beautiful game, from the past to the present, teams, players, managers, every aspect you can think of, really. And I also do a newsletter which comes out the first of every month to really recap on the books that's come out that month and what's coming out soon, etc. So, and if you don't mind, I also add a plug. I also merchandise football books, bookmarks, and my football mugs as well. So to accompany you when you're reading your favourite book at the time.
Absolutely. The books that have come out before Christmas, we talked about on the last podcast. What books did you have for Christmas, firstly? And what books are coming out before Easter?
Yeah, there's plenty coming out. So over Christmas, a number of books, really. One that sticks out, which is a book because I've read it before, but I wanted to read back to it. It was Natural by David Tossell, which is the natural Jimmy Greaves story. It just reminded me to read it again because of Harry Kane recently, breaking the record. It was coming up to him recently breaking the record, and it's a fantastic story. A number of books have been written about Jimmy Greaves, but David Tossell's book's one that sticks out for me. And it just draws on interviews with family, friends, and colleagues and opponents. And it's a great biography of one of England's most loved footballers.
Does it mention the 2 goals that Tottenham didn't count because he scored them in 1962 in the Charity Shield, and that's why Harry Kane is still behind Jimmy Greaves?
I think it does say there. Yeah, it does say on the back of it, it's a record 357 top flight goals,
absolutely,
which may never be surpassed. So, exactly.
124 for Chelsea, 220 for Tottenham, and 13 for West Ham United. Well done, James. Oh, and by the way, you scored goals for AC Milan as well in Italy.
Yeah, exactly. You forget that, don't you? Yeah.
Well, lots of people do, but I don't, because football is a bugbear of both of us. And we do speak about it on the podcast, that football wasn't invented in 1992. I love the historic content of football and the books relating to that. The first football season was 1888/1889. Preston North End won the league and the cup. They were the first team ever to win the double, the original Invincibles. And I believe in that football season actually did not lose a game.
Yeah. No, absolutely.
Well, they
Absolutely.
wouldn't have, would they, really, to be fair? If they won the Cup and the League, they wouldn't have lost a game. What a season.
Yeah.
Phenomenal.
Absolutely. Absolutely. There's lots of books I've got on at the moment, and I'll probably kick off, actually. That's what I read over Christmas. I've not managed to do as much reading so far this year, but one book that's landed on my post today, or on the doorstep, is a book that's literally come out today called The Match.
I've got it as well.
You've got it. Excellent. Yeah. So the story of Italy versus Brazil, 1982, and it's well, as you've seen it, then it's a chunk of a book, isn't it?
I was just enormous. About to say, describe how thick this book is. I've got it on my bedside cabinet. If I dropped it, it would break my foot. It's huge, isn't it? It's only about a match.
I know, it's incredible. It's over 500 pages about one match,
which
says everything about the game itself. I know, but it's beautifully written as well, and I think you can tell already it's going to be an all-time classic, because actually it's already been released across the world, in other parts of the world. I know when I shared it on Twitter, a number had already mentioned it, because I have followers all over the world, which is incredible again, the reach. But you'll see just in the first few pages, it says what you got, the Gazzetta dello Sport, that says it's an ode to football, a poignant ode to the most beautiful game in the world, a sum of wonderful stories which keep you glued to the page. But it is one chunk of a book. Yeah, absolutely.
It is.
You're not going to read it in one session. Well, I'd be amazed if you did.
Probably about 6 years to read that, the way that I read football books. But it is quite phenomenal when you think that it is just a match. I love the cover there. You've got Paolo Rossi Junior just shadowing him. The story of Italy versus Brazil in 1982. And wouldn't it be great? I mean, I do a podcast, another podcast called Game of My Life. This would be one of the games of, certainly of my lifetime of watching football. But what I do is I talk to a player and they talk me through that game that they played in. Sadly, we wouldn't be able to talk to Paolo because he has passed away. I think he passed away last year, didn't he? Paolo Rossi. And Junior could probably only speak Portuguese. So we probably won't be doing a podcast about this match. But there is a book about this match. And wouldn't it be great if you looked at all the most historic, iconic games in the history of football and somebody wrote a chunk-sized book about all of them? I'd love to have them in my library.
It would be impressive, wouldn't it? It would be impressive. What's quite fitting, actually, I did notice today that I was John Motson, obviously, who sadly lost just very recently. I know he put it as one of his favourite ever games that he ever commentated on as well. So it's quite fitting, really. And I know I was watching back some highlights, and there's a bit where, if you remember Serginho, I think they were 1-0 down at the time, and he missed it, didn't he?
Yeah, he did, yeah.
John Motson says it's the sort of miss a Sunday morning player wouldn't have missed. So got a good line in there, Motson did.
But Serginho was, I mean, I don't know much about him. I do remember him from that game and that 82 tournament of Brazil, but he was probably, it does sound a little bit disrespectful, and you shouldn't really say it, but I'm gonna. But he's probably the worst Brazilian central striker of all time, isn't he?
Yeah, he was, wasn't
he? But that's all they needed. Imagine Ronaldo, Brazilian, the proper Ronaldo, playing in that 82 team.
I know.
Could you imagine like Pelé playing in that 82 team? Could you imagine any of the great Brazilian forwards playing in that 82 team? They'd have won the World Cup.
I think it's probably unfairly carried the candle in for the team's defensive failings, but I think it's the fact that he plays alongside the likes of Socrates, Zico, etc. You could, any player would look average against that lot, wouldn't they? But I think, he was a huge centre forward, wasn't he? He was a big old lump of a player.
Yeah, right lump. But, almost as big as this book.
Yeah, absolutely. But it's a fantastic. I love the way the book is actually, if you've had a chance to have a glance through it, the way it's written, there's lots of short stories. Actually, contents go over 5 pages on its own. But it's a series of short stories. Will make it easy to read as well. But one one thing I will pick out, I jumped to one of the pages, it says on conclusion, and it quotes, it's Tim Lewis, who says this. It says, "I'm not exaggerating when I say that Brazil's defeat against Italy was the worst and the most destructive event in my first 7 years on this earth. The separation of my parents was barely a setback in comparison." So it just shows the attachment people had to that game as well. I
would agree that game really was a scientific football team, Italy, and the way that they played. I believe in that tournament, and I haven't got the records in front of me, but if I looked at Brian Glanville wrote a brilliant book about the World Cup, and it goes back from the first tournament in 30 up to I think it was the Russia tournament that he wrote it either just before. I think it was just before Russia World Cup, if I'm honest.
Yeah.
And I think if we went through to that one in 82, I don't think Italy won a game in qualification and probably only scored one goal. From memory, they seem to have drawn a lot of games, but this was the game that Paolo Rossi really came to the fore, and Italy knocked out the prospective champions. And I think that Brazil was everybody's team because of the way that they played. Fans fell in love with them, but Italy were very, very, very functional, and of course went on to win the World Cup. And there are some schools of thought that say that's arguably the worst thing that happened to football in 82, that the science took over from the art.
Yeah, you've got a great memory as well, because Italy they drew all their group matches.
Did they really?
Against Poland, Peru, and Cameroon. I mean, you think of the teams they were playing against, and they managed to get through to the next round. When, in comparison, the Brazil team, and that's what caught the imagination. They were scoring goals for fun.
How many goals did Italy score in that qualification? Because I can't remember many. What was the result? Have you got it to hand?
It was 0-0. 1-1 and 1-1 in the group stages.
Yeah, got you. So it was 2 goals.
So in the second round, they played Argentina, I think it was. Because it was kind of split, wasn't it? You had that kind of weird split of these smaller groups, didn't you?
Because England, we played in that tournament. We didn't get beat. We were the only team, I believe, that didn't get beat, and we come out.
Yeah.
It was a mad way of it was a mad way of doing the World Cup back in those days, because they had groups and pools, and then you played, and I do think the formula now, you actually win a game in a knockout, and then you go through. If you get beat, you go out. And I think it's a far better way of doing it, because they kind of didn't do it like that in those days. I think they had a group and then another group and different pools, and it was just a bit bizarre and bonkers. But I think it was probably as commercialisation had kicked into football, they were looking to maximise income revenues, etc., and giving you more bites of the cherry.
Yeah, definitely. And he talks about in this book, I see in the, gives you a bit of a preview, it talks about how the commercial side of the World Cup influenced every aspect of the Mondial, influenced every aspect of the game as well. So, but just on that, England, they drew against West Germany, obviously got them to the final. So, just again, it shows you how it was a strange way how it was set out in those times, wasn't it?
Absolutely.
The knockout stage.
And I love the way the match is written on the front cover. Piero Trellini, I don't know much or anything about Piero, but he must be very, very proud of this book. And it is done in a kind of a transitional period of the 70s through the 80s, the way that the match is drawn. And what I also must stress is Pitch Publishing do so many fantastic books, but they do the best front covers as well, don't they, Pitch?
They do.
I don't know who works for them doing that, but he or she is an absolute genius.
You don't have to overdo it, do you?
No.
Sometimes certain books, or you just that is just an iconic picture just on the front, isn't it? And like you say, the way the match is written, and it just sticks out. You don't need to do anything more than that, and it just works perfectly, doesn't it?
Yeah, it does.
It's eye-catching, isn't it? So
you look at it, it just says "Buy me," don't it?
It does, yeah, it does. And then you realise how big it is, a chunk of it. I must admit, I did obviously no idea until it arrived, and I thought, crikey, that is one hell of a book. That's going to take me some time, that is. It's not going to be a couple of sit-downs.
It certainly won't. And
but it looks an easy enough to read, like I say, because it's broken into... I just like the way it's written in little chapters, so it's got lots of little stories. So you've got little stories, it says, one that talks, because it breaks it down. You've got the match, and then you've got the first half, and then you've got various subtitles, sub-chapters underneath that, then half-time, second half, conclusion. It's broken down into lots of easy-to-read areas. So, I look forward to reading it, and, what an iconic match that was.
I look forward to just looking at the front and the back cover and skipping through looking at the colour pages in between.
There is colour pages in it, yeah. You see, there's lots of colour pages as well to look at as well.
The text frightens me. It's absolutely, as you say, a chunk of a book. A book that I also want to give a mention to in the podcast this month is The Road to 76 by Francis Peacock. And it's a story of Queen's Park Rangers' season in 75 to 76, where they finished the football season top of the pile, and Liverpool had just got to go to an already relegated Wolverhampton Wanderers, and they did put Wolves to the sword and overtook Queen's Park Rangers, and as a result, they took the First Division Championship away from Shepherd's Bush back up to Merseyside. But that QPR team, I mean, of course we can remember Liverpool players and Liverpool teams, because since Shankly walked through those gates at Anfield, he really transformed Liverpool and turned them into one of the greatest sides in the world. But when you're looking at that QPR team, we could probably name more Queen's Park Rangers players of that season than Liverpool. I think QPR were absolutely fabulous. And in this book, the Road to 76, Francis Peacock absolutely nails Queen's Park Rangers' greatest ever season. And I think if you turn the 7 and the 6 around, you get 67, which I think is quite ironic there, because 1967 was the year that Queen's Park Rangers won the League Cup, and Rodney was the darling of the terraces, and in 1976 it was Stanley, the guy who replaced him, that was the king of Loftus Road.
Stan Bowles, I've seen that book, because I think the profits of the book were donated to the Alzheimer's Society as well, isn't it, for Stan Bowles? I'm not sure. Yeah, I think I saw it somewhere. So if I think of the same book you're referring to, The Road to 76. But again, like you said, what a team that was.
Absolutely. And I would love to have all these different books of these iconic teams of the seasons. There's the season 1971-72 season by Dan Abrams, who I've cut a podcast with Daniel, and that's about that iconic season. And I guess really it was my first season growing up as a kid, appreciating football, and it's great to have the memories of month by month, all that went on, not just over here in the UK, in England, in Great Britain, but a more general in Europe as well. And you look at it, you just think you've got it there in your hands. It's again another chunk of a book, great iconic covers and memories of a fantastic season of the 70s.
Absolutely. Was it Dave Sexton was the Chelsea? Was he the manager of QPR at that time?
In 1971-72, Dave was still at Chelsea, unfortunately.
75-76, sorry.
He may well have been,
I can't remember.
I'm almost certain, because there was Sexton, there was Jago, They had they had a few managers, didn't they, around that time?
They did, yeah. That's what I'm trying to remember.
But I'm sure, without researching it, I'm sure that that Sexton was the manager. Because I remember Alan saying to me, he was talking to Frank McClintock, and McClintock was saying you let Dave down, you players, and Uddy had his opinion of Dave Sexton, and Dave Sexton done really well at QPR. Dave Sexton done really well at Chelsea as well, but you know, I never met the guy. I've only seen the results of his fruits of his labours, and through Alan, you know, I'm absolutely convinced that Dave Sexton was a great coach, and Alan would say he was a great coach and he was a lovely man, but he wasn't a manager. And again, I'm not too sure when he arrived, how long he had it, but sometimes managers take over at football clubs in an ascendancy, rather than sometimes they take over a club when they're at the bottom and they've got to build it. So I'm not 100% certain, but a great coach, but not a great manager, is what Alan Hudson would say about Sexton.
He succeeded Tommy Docherty at Man United. I remember Sexton as well. Yes, I think that was the middle of the 70s, around about that time. So, and again, I know all of this just from reading the books, I must admit. I'm not quite at that age, but there's a number of books that I can just read off the top of my head, actually. Get It On, about how the 70s rocked football by John Spurling. You've got All Crazy Now.
We've got 90s. Both with those, All Crazy Now and Get It On, with both David and John. We've cut podcasts, so they're out there on all the usual outlets for podcasts, Spotify and Apple, etc., etc. And again, great chunks of books, mate.
Yeah, absolutely. Great list as well on your podcast as well, so it brings it to life as well off the page. So, but some great stories, isn't it? Great characters.
I think the greatest characters. I think the greatest. And going back to Dave Sexton, I remember Ron telling me that when he took over as Aston Villa manager, he had Dave working with the kids, and that was something that he developed from Jimmy Hogan, because Jimmy was a great coach, and Jimmy was the coach of the third team, and Ron said he was that great a coach. I remember I didn't want to play for the reserves. I'd rather play for Jimmy. And he remembered that, and he knew that Dave was great with the kids and a great coach, and he brought Dave Sexton in at Villa to coach there. So, you know, often is the case with great men of football, not necessarily managers, although some have managed, but the longevity of their career is overlooked because in many instances they were coaches of intermediate or third teams or the reserve team, but they're still about and still very, very influential in what they do with the development of the younger players. And Dave Sexton also, if memory serves me right, was under 21 manager or coach, wasn't he? England.
Yeah, he was. England. Yeah. I remember reading that as well. I think it was in the 90s, wasn't it?
Yeah, I think so.
that might have been in the 90s. Yeah,
I think so. And I think if memory serves me right, wasn't he at Coventry City as well as a coach? You know.
Yes.
So I mean, you know, again, a great
career.
Coach. Yeah, great coach, a great career. And sometimes you're better off working at what you're best at. And I think in Sexton's case, coaching rather than management. What else you got, mate?
Well, I'll refer to another book that's come out today. Recently come out today. It's called The Derby Game. This is again out through Pitch. It's by Ian Collis, and it's basically a history of local rivalries. And again, it's come out today, and I've only just received it as well. But it's basically the history of the game, and it's focused originally around the Derby Shrove Tide football. I don't know if you're familiar with that.
I've seen the YouTube clips.
Well, that's there's Aviston, but this one's actually in I know which one you refer to. This is the one in Ashbourne, though. The Shrovetide football game is the one in Ashbourne, which is played on Shrove Tuesday.
That's the
one. It was only last week, actually. Yes, and actually, I always famously remember there's a picture of Brian Clough, because they always have a celebrity of someone of significance that starts the game off, and Brian Clough kicked it off, I think, in one of the years, might be 1975, something like that. And there's a picture of him being held up by a load of the players, and he's holding the ball, and then he chucks it, and they all start. And it's basically between two sides. One it's up at the top of the hill, and then there's another team at the bottom of the hill, and they've got to get it into each other's area, etc. But it's this book, I think the Atherstone ones, I think I can't tell you what it's called, but I know the one you talk about where they're literally all scrapping with each other, aren't they?
Yeah.
Bit similar. This one, that one is. Yeah, I've seen the videos. It's unbelievable, isn't it?
Brutal, isn't it?
So, yeah, very. And the Derby Shrovetide is quite similar, but it talks about that. It talks about the history of that game, and it's been going for years and years and years, a long time ago. But it talks about it's a fascinating tale of. Explores the rise of local football. So this is on a very much a town level. I mean, it covers the early clashes of local rivals, the Victorian football hot spots, and then it's just again another. I know we talked about a lot. It's a lot about when people forget how football started in the Victoria times, and we think of massive rivalries now, don't we? We just had Rangers Celtic yesterday in the League Cup final, and that's just one of them. But yeah, it's an interesting book, so the history of local rivalries, and which just gives it another angle to football in itself, isn't it?
But that's how they get the word the derby, isn't it? Because of those games that go back in historical times where you would have 400 aside, there would be a scrap and a ball somewhere in the middle of the scrap, and derbies are the most fiercest games that you'll play often in a derby. Yeah. There isn't much football being played, but it's very physical, and that's why they do give them the name the derby, because that's where it come from. So book out now, and again, great timing, because it does go back to the time of the Shrove Tuesday and those historical games played years ago. But I'd have given that a right wide berth. I wouldn't have got involved in any of them games. Far too physical for me.
Yeah, absolutely. It is absolutely frightening.
They're just thugs, aren't they?
But it goes on for hours and hours, doesn't
it? God,
the Shrovetide game in Ashbourne, I think it starts on the Tuesday, and I think nothing ends till the following day. And I remember seeing a clip of it 2 years back, where they had the local reporters there, and the town looks an absolute, like an Armageddon.
Oh, you would
there's stuff everywhere, walls knocked over. But what they always do, the day after, they clean up all themselves. There's walls falling down, they build it back up, etc. And it's spotless again, because they enjoy it, don't they? It's tradition, isn't it?
Yeah, it's great going now, knocking out of each other and smashing the town on the going their day after the alcohol has dissipated and going and building it back up again. But why do they call it Shrove Tide? Where does the tide come into it?
Oh, I think it's...
So I kept hearing that on Talk Sport, where they're saying Shrove Tide, and I thought, where's the tide? Because there's no sea where they're playing in Atherstone, but they did keep mentioning tide, and I thought, I'd not heard that before. I've always heard the Shrove Tuesday, but not Shrove Tide. So
I'm not sure it's been... I don't know if it's linked to the name of the ball. I can't remember, because the ball's slightly bigger than a normal football.
And, it is like a pudding, isn't it?
Yeah, that's it. So it's like a hand leather ball, isn't it?
It's like a big medicine ball, isn't it?
It is. That's it. I think it's actually filled with cork chippings or something like that, which
really?
floats on water or something like that. I remember. It weighs. I've got it here actually. It says weighs 4 pounds.
Okay.
So the ball is carefully hand painted as well. The design chosen by the local person who picked to turn up the ball at the start of the match. So that's like Brian Clough and whoever. But Not sure whether it's Show Trial. It must be linked to... The Show Trial anthem is a song that was written in 1891, so... Yeah, okay, I don't know. Maybe someone who's listening could help us and explain.
Or if not, we can always at a later date go on to Google and have a look.
Yeah,
or read the
Ever in
book.
doubt.
Or read the book. I'm sure it's in the book, and it explains all
yeah.
about the Shrove Tide games.
Yeah.
What else have you got for us, mate?
So I'm just going to focus on ones that have been recently released then.
Yeah.
So I've run through some others that were released in February. I'll just run through a couple of these because I've not read them myself. But there's a book called The Social One, and it's by Marius Mansos. And it sets out why Jurgen Klopp and Liverpool Football Club are a match made in heaven. So it's just talk about the social aspects. And there's a strong hold of socialism. Klopp and the man who says he never would vote for the right and spoke to the heart of the city and became an honorary Scouser. And it just talks about it's a detailed portrait of Klopp, and it's not just a football book, but a study of leadership and motivation. So there's many different aspects you could talk about football, isn't there? And there's always been a link to society and politics and whether you like it or not. There's always been there's a close link, and clearly there is on in Liverpool as well. But that book has recently come out. Again, that's come out through Pitch. Another one that's come out through Pitch is called A Nation Again, which is the inside story of Scotland's journey to the European Championships. And it's basically a chaotic tale of Scotland's men's team's return to a major tournament after more than 20 years in the wilderness. And this is about when they qualified for the Euro 2020, which actually played in 21, wasn't it, because of COVID. It just talks about the Scottish FA turned to Steve Clarke at the time. After a number of managers had tried before, Strachan springs to mind. Alex Chriis, I think, was another one. There was a few attempts, wasn't there? So to try and get them back into a major tournament. Yeah. But that will certainly appeal to people north of the border. And one other one I'll just mention as well. Well, a couple of us. Eternal.
Yes.
Duncan
Barton.
Edwards. Yeah, by Wayne Barton. So I've not read it yet myself, but again, it's a good, another big chunk of the book. And so it's a few footballers, demanded as much attention as Duncan Edwards. Who's obviously a shining jewel, wasn't he, of the Busby Bays. And he was only 21 when he tragically passed away. As a result of the injuries he picked up, obviously Munich air disaster, which is obviously commemorated not that long ago, was it, in February?
Yeah, awful. It's not the first book about Duncan, but
no, it's not.
I believe it's probably a different kind of book because there's no point in bringing out the same book. So I don't know what angle Wayne has looked at and has written about, but he's an author of many Manchester United books, and I did do a podcast with Wayne when he brought out was it True Genius about
True
George
Genius,
Best?
George Best last couple of years back now,
isn't
it?
Yeah, a couple of years ago, yeah.
Yeah, he's got a wonderful style of writing. He's very much like the inside person when it comes to anything Manchester United related. And but that particular book, I've not read it myself, but it's already like doing incredibly high. Like if you look in all the rankings, like on Amazon and places like that. So you can kind of tell, when some books are good. So, it's brand new biography, but it takes a look at like all his life and his childhood, and obviously it's got authorization from the Edwards family, so that maybe gives you a bit more of an in-depth look, let's say, a bit more of a personal look, as opposed to just talking about how great a footballer he was. That's what Wayne's really good at. He talks about things just away from the pitch as well, a bit about the individual, and that brings it a bit more to a personal touch, let's say, a bit more intimate, if that makes sense.
Absolutely.
But yeah, what a player he was, and obviously at just the age of 21.
Yeah, sad. I mean, the average age of the babes was 22. When 8 of them sadly died in the air disaster at Munich when they stopped off to refuel after a 3-3 draw against Red Star of Belgrade, and Duncan died a few days after with the injuries that he sustained in that
Yeah.
Ed disaster. It was horrendous. The flowers of Manchester, the flowers of English football, and never shall be forgotten. So well done, Wayne, for writing a fantastic book, Eternal, about the great Duncan Edwards, one of our greats that most of us have never seen. But you know, when you get a player that is so great, you arguably don't really need to have seen him play, because when players tell you that he was that good, you just take it as read. It's like that we didn't see, you know, many games of Puskás or Di Stefano or, you know, Neil Franklin, for instance, but we know that they were great players because of what's been written about them and what's been passed down. And, fantastic.
Gone but not forgotten.
Fantastic that we can use text and keep those memories alive. So, Eternal by Wayne Barton. What else we got, mate?
Well, linking up to sort of Gone but Never Forgotten, a book another come out in February is Forgotten Football Clubs by Philip O'Rourke, and this is about 50 teams across the world that are no longer in existence in one way or another, and they're gone but not forgotten. So it's a fascinating story. I've read part of it, but it's based the stories of 50 lost clubs from around the world, including their histories, successes, and ultimate failures. But what's interesting, it takes it from all around the world as well. It's literally clubs from England, France, Japan, China, Australia, all areas. So, but to just give you a bit of a snippet, it talks about there's an Irish club that called Sporting Fingal FC. They're a team who were formed and won a cup, reached Europe and folded literally in the space of 3 years. So they were formed, won a cup, reached Europe and folded. So it was quite a quick story, but what a success in such a short time. But a club that you never would have heard of, you know, if it weren't for books like this. But it also has books about there's a club that played at the highest altitude in the world. And the women's, well, you'll know of the Dick, I forget the ladies' names. That's Dick Ladies. That was
munition factory in Lancashire.
Yeah, it defied the odds and became the pioneers of the women's game. They were trailblazers for girls worldwide to dream of becoming footballers themselves.
Lily Parr played from, didn't she?
That's it. Yeah, that's it. Dick Ladies. So there's a number of other books, but that's Forgotten Football Clubs, and again by Pitch Publishing. So. Get some lovely artwork on that one as well. So, but again, it just evokes memories and nostalgia and all those past glories and stories again you never would have heard of if someone like Philip O'Rourke didn't do things like that and put pen to paper. So, looks a fascinating read.
The year we nearly won the league, Jonathan Baker, about Stoke City in the 1974-75 season. I think Stoke were at 4 points off being crowned champions of England. That would, 1974-75 season. So that started in the August of 74 through to the May of 75. Alan Hudson joined Stoke City in the January of 1974. And our next podcast, Hudson 74, we're going to be talking all about that year. We did a podcast about 1973 yesterday once more, which was a big hit for the Carpenters in 1973, and a favourite of Alan Hudson. So we looked at Alan's last year at Chelsea in 1973, and we're going to be looking at Alan's first year at Stoke City from January the 1st to December the 31st. And it's going to be a remarkable podcast. It'll be a little bit like a chunk of a podcast, a bit like the Match by Piero Trellini. Because we don't just look at the games, we look at the music. Our regular podcast is My Life, My Music. So we're going to be looking at the music around that times and certain things that happened around those times, the IRA were bombing not just pubs, but bombing a lot in and on the mainland. We had Watergate as well in America. I noticed and put up on Alan's socials today. Ted Bundy was on the run in America, and it was the year that Seattle Sounders were born in 1974, a club that Alan joined a few years after he joined and played for Stoke City after his Arsenal encounters and years there at Highbury. So yeah, looking forward to making that with Alan. 1974, Hudson 74.
Excellent. Was that his first season at Stoke City? That season, 74, 75?
No, it would have been the 73-74 season was his first, but he didn't join. Okay. He didn't join till the January of 74, so they'd had half a season already. Yeah. Stoke City, when Alan joined, they'd played away at Ipswich. They drew 1-1, and as a consequence, dropped into the bottom three. And Alan turned to his Uncle George and says, "George, what have I done?" But by the end of the season, Hudson had transformed Stoke City's triumphs onto the pitch, and they got into Europe. So they were playing the likes of Ajax the season after. But we're going to be talking all about that iconic first 12 months of Alan, and I think that there is a school of thought that if Uddy would have joined earlier, perhaps Stoke would have won the league. But there you go, it's all ifs, buts and maybe.
Well, it was his autobiography that the manager at the time, Tony Warburton, described it as the working man's ballet, which was the name of Hudson's autobiography that came out. Well, I forget now, late 90s. No, it's been out a good 20 years now, hasn't it? So, fantastic book itself.
Certainly come out It come out recently because it had come out, I think you're right, I think it was 96, because it didn't mention about the car crash, because on 15th of December 1997, Alan had a hit and run that almost killed him. He was given the last rites. They didn't think he was going to pull through. He spent so much time in hospital, and we've covered that on many podcasts.
Was he 2 months in a coma? Do you remember listening to one of the podcasts?
Alan was 59 days in a coma.
59, yeah.
He got it on the 15th of December 1997, and he woke up in February 1998. But he was going to be working on the World Cup finals in 1998 as well, and his life was transformed. But a top player, a great man, and we're going to be talking about 1974. But they had a re-release a few years ago of the Working Man's Ballet, and that talks about the car incident where Alan was involved in a hit and run. The police deemed that Hudson had walked in the road and a car struck him, but no, that's not the case. But we will leave that and move on.
I look forward to reading that one. I've not read it as of yet. I know it came out last year.
But it was
what a scene that was. What a scene. Gordon Banks as well, Shilton, wasn't there?
Well, Gordon had retired by then because
he retired by then.
His car crash. John Farmer was the goalkeeper and then replaced by Peter Shilton. Alan will always say that Farmer was a better goalkeeper than Shilton.
Really? Right, yeah.
And I think many Stoke fans would echo that as well. But Shilton joined the team. They'd already, of course, got Jimmy Greenough and Terry Conroy, and most of the players were already there. Waddington had assembled a fantastic group of players, and Hudson, to all intent and purpose, was the last piece of the jigsaw, and what a piece of the jigsaw. He was going to buy Peter Osgood as well, and he did wait up all night for Ozzy to phone him, And when Alan seen him the next morning, thought, this is the kind of guy I want to work for. He's been up all night. But it was because he was waiting for Osgood, but Osgood didn't phone him. And of course, joined Laurie at Southampton. And where Osgood went down into the second division with Southampton, Alan Hudson really did transform Stoke City and turned them into a championship winning side.
Yeah, great team. Great team. As
were many. I mean, there's a barrel full of, what is it? The Sheffield United book?
Oh, yeah, the Sheffield United book that came out. The barrel of, it'll come to me in a moment.
Yeah, it will to me as well.
Again, it came out through pitch, didn't it?
Yes, it did. But again, Sheffield United in that season with Tony Curry, what a fabulous team. Ipswich Town, fabulous team. You know, we had other sides that necessarily you wouldn't have thought would be up and running and vying for championships. We mentioned Queen's Park Rangers. You had Forest that come up from second division and took the title in 78. So the 70s titles was won probably by more football clubs than any other decade. Of course, Derby County won it twice in the 70s. Everton won the first, Arsenal won the double. You know, there was lots of... Leicester City had a great side back in those days. Aston Villa in 76, 77, very unlucky, won the League Cup, but had luck been shining on them, and Andy Gray would have stayed fully fit. Aston Villa could have won the treble. You know, there was a lot of great sides. The 70s was a fabulous decade of football.
Before I move on to one link to that, it was Ain't Got a Barrel of Money.
That's it. Ain't got a barrel full of money.
Yeah,
Big up and Curry. Yeah, exactly. Woodward and Curry, wasn't it?
Yeah.
And of course, Trevor Rocky, the smelliest feet in football, and the funkiest car. And if you're wondering what we're talking about there, all the patreons.com/SRB media, and you can listen to Tony Curry talk about those halcyon days at Bramall Lane.
Yeah, excellent. Written by Jason Hollyhead,
Yes, that's the one.
Lifelong Sheffield United fan. So, but linked to that, there's a book that I've recently received, and it's called They Played for David Pleat at Luton Town. It's a book by Phil Duffy, and it's an interview of a number of players. So, and on the back of it, January 1978, the Luton Town Football Club were at a critical point of transition in their history, fresh out of Harry Hanslam's stewardship as he moved to Sheffield United. This had ushered in the appointment of the club's young coach. At that age, just 34 he was, 34, David Pleat, as the first team manager. Yeah, I didn't realise he was that young. Mm-hmm. So, and the 8 years that followed David Pleat's appointment are viewed, probably the golden period in that club's history, so the late 70s. They picked up a number of admirers. And you think of the players that are mentioned, and the household names in this book, you've got Ricky Hill, Paul Walsh, Brian Steele, Nick Harford. Some really good names there and players, etc. So this book is a hell of a chunk of a book as well. It's actually volume 1 as well. This is so, and it's I think it's independently published as well. This book, it's not just about David Pleat, but it's a book about the players and the stories around them. But it's also players who didn't make the first team, etc. It's quite a wide variety, but definitely must read for Luton Town fans. And looks like a really interesting read. But again, another team, around about that time that you don't really remember, but you remember some of the names, don't you? Ricky Hill and what have you, Paul Walsh.
You certainly do, and I think that when you're looking at certain managers that are synonymous with the development and the growth of teams like Luton, Graham Taylor springs to mind. At Watford, and what a job he done at Watford. Again, not my cup of tea the way that he played football, but you've got to give credit where it's due. And you would say Graham Taylor, and people would say, "Oh, what a job he done at Watford then." And with David Pleat, iconic times there. Bobby Robinson there at Ipswich Town. Tony Waddington,
Yeah.
what he done, 17 seasons there at Stoke City. You know, these are sides that are unfashionable sides, but managers were given license to produce, and boy, did they produce. Now, if you don't produce in 7 games in the Premier League, you get a sack.
Well, and all of those ones you talked about are all homegrown. I know it's a very
Absolutely.
different world then, of course.
Mm.
You know, you've not got the influence of the overseas.
It was a better world back then. Managers had time to produce. Managers didn't have the daggers out from the first defeat that they'd encounter.
Well,
you know, people that owned football clubs were a lot more football savvy back in those days.
They were, and that was a local butcher, wasn't it, or something like that? It was a local business owner that owned the club
again,
as well.
in terms of Burnley Football Club, it was a local butcher.
It was
Bob Lord.
Bob Lord.
I mean, they weren't saints, and you know, I did say they'd know more about football, but I'm not convinced actually that I'm right when I do say that. But you know, they must have employed people that knew things about football because you know, managers did stay. Mind you, players stay. Players had testimonials. I mean, now if you play, if you actually see out your contract now as a player or a manager, you've done bloody well and you're loyal to that football club. It's crazy. You know, footballers spent their whole lives at certain clubs, and, you know, that's when, you know, football fans back in our day would say, he's a legend of that football club. You've only got to score a goal in an important game now and you're a legend. And that could be on a PlayStation.
Yeah, absolutely.
That's
I know.
crazy.
The longest serving manager now must be in the Premier League. It must be Jurgen Klopp, I would have thought.
I just think it's absolutely bonkers. Football actually gets what it deserves these days because of the stupidity, the naivety, and just the ridiculous way that football clubs are being run. You know,
the thrust always, it's got to be about winning now and everything. There's a real, everyone wants their team to win, etc. But there's such a drive for so many teams to, and no one accepts second, do they, or third, and I don't know. But anyway, I could go off on a tangent there.
I just think as long as your team are playing good football and producing, then I'm happy. I mean, would I be happy going down and watching my team get beat 3-4 and having a great game and being 16th in the league, whatever? Yeah, I would be, because I just want to watch. I just want to watch football. That's what I want to watch. I don't want to watch a team grind out a result and I go home and go, we've won or we've drawn 1-1. What a boring game. The winning goal come off the backside of the opponent's defenders. Give me exciting, glorious football like we had in the 70s all day long.
Yeah, absolutely. So I mentioned another book then from February. So again, it was come to me. And it's called, and again, this really goes back. It's called So Much More Than That. And the subtitle is The British Family Journey of Football History, War and Migration by Hannah Granger Clemson. And it's really interesting because it focuses on a number of the major cities. So you've got Glasgow, Birmingham are covered in this, Manchester and others. And it's basically just talks about the fascinating family journey of football. And there's quite a bit on Birmingham, which is really quite interesting. You'll find it interesting to read as well. It talks about the industrial heartlands, around Birmingham and how football was very much, linked to that and how it grew in terms of its importance, really, to the ordinary people that served the time, etc. But it goes, it explores that and delves into the light and the dark side of sport and society, the passion, the hard work, and it talks about the likes of the Peaky Blinder gangs, etc. as well. But it's really interesting. It's really well written as well. I've not read it fully as of yet. But it's, again, I'm one of these, I love the history. If you can link that to football as well, and it's a great concoction, really. It's written by a lady that certainly knows her stuff. She's a professor who obviously loves football as well. It just talks about how football's culture is complex and often controversial. And there's debates over the rules, transfers, wages, rich owners, etc. Even then, but nothing like what it is now. Of course, completely different in terms of the scale. But no, really interesting. But again, it goes back to some of those earlier times as well. So, but yeah, that's just recently come out, and yeah, you guessed it, come out through Pitch as well, that particular one as well.
Yeah, great publishers.
Yeah, but it's really interesting. So, a really interesting mixture of those early days as well. And another one I'll mention is England's Calamity, and this is based on that 1953 game, England against Hungary.
Okay.
So there was only a book that came out fairly recently, as you know of.
Match of the Century by Matt Clough.
That's it, which I know you did a fantastic podcast with as well, didn't you?
No, I haven't done one with Matt.
Oh, have you not done it yet?
No, I've not. They didn't get back to me. I did a podcast, Alchemy.
Yes, that's something. Yeah,
I did.
I get mixed up
with that book. We done one of Alchemy, but we haven't. I'm going to be doing a podcast with Ajax of the 70s.
Oh, right, okay.
Gary Thacker's new book.
Oh, yes.
I did, if you remember, a podcast with Gary talking about his beautiful bridesmaids dressed in orange. But his latest book comes out shortly. I think it might be May time that it comes out. You can pre-order it now, guys, if you go onto a search engine, look for Gary Thacker, and look at the Ajax book of the early 70s, where Ajax dominated. So it's a nice little book that sits alongside the beautiful bridesmaids dressed in orange. But Ajax, the difference is Ajax wasn't bridesmaids; they were the bride.
I think it's called Dutch Masters, isn't it? So, when they conquered Europe.
Yes, I think it is, yeah.
Yeah, total football. So, no, great writer again, is he, Gary Thacker. I remember you did a podcast with him on his book on Chelsea as well, if I remember rightly.
Yes, 2012,
Yeah,
out of the blue. Yeah, great writer. And part of the oh God, what they're called now? These
Football Times, yeah.
That's the thing when you don't have things written down and it's off the top of your head. But a great writing group and podcasters to boot. Fantastic books that have come out of that project, and the fella Horsfield, who's written a book about 1982 Brazil. Stuart Horsfield. So that again, they tend to write these books, do something, and then think, oh, there's another book there, and very important group of books. And Aidan Williamson has wrote The Neely Men as well. So there's some great writing from those fellas. Yeah. And also, let's mention, while we're talking about different podcasters, The Blizzard by Jonathan Wilson, who's written so many fantastic books as well. Well done, Jonathan.
Yeah, one of my favourite authors, definitely, Jonathan Wilson.
One of my favourite authors that I've never read, but I have got his books. I've got all these books from these fellas, but I just haven't read them.
Well, if you ever decide to read one of them, and you might think the title, I'm not sure about it, but there's a book called Inverting the Pyramid, and it's the history of football tactics. Now, that might sound... It's definitely one of those, if you look at it, you thought, I'm not sure about that, but when you read it, it's a fascinating book, and it's one of the most... it's in top 10 lists of many, many people's favourite books. It's a classic, and it's just the way it's written. It's about history of football, but it's linked to tactics and how it's all changed as well. But
I don't like tactics. I would never read that book.
And that's what's fascinating.
I'd listen to Jonathan talk tactics about England and that, and I turn him off when he talks about that. Just talk about the historic content and what you know. I'm not a great lover of non-footballing people talking about football in a tactical way, because I don't think we know what we're on about. You know, we've all played football, but unless you've actually played, Ray Oakley used to say this on TalkSport, unless you play the game, you don't know what you're going on about. And it does wind a lot of football fans up, but it's very true.
Yeah.
It's very true because
yeah.
unless you've been in that dressing room, and I've listened to tales of the dressing room from Terry and from Alan and from other players that I've made podcasts with, but we don't know what it's like, and again, I've always been of the opinion that you get your tactics, stick them up your backside. I don't like tactics. It's football players that win games, not tactics. I'm not. Yeah. I'll never buy tactics. I don't like it.
You'll probably prefer his other book, man. The name's heard long ago. That's the one on the Hungarian. That's the better one.
That's a proper book. I mean, that is a proper book.
That's beautifully written. Yeah.
And has he not recently wrote one about Jack and Bobby as well? Didn't Jonathan do one?
Two brothers.
That's the one.
Yeah, two brothers. Obviously, there's been a few books out. I don't know. I remember you reminded me on one of the podcasts before, but
yes,
he did that last year. The story of Jack and Bobby Charlton. He wrote last year as well.
And
every book.
Yeah, that's
Wilson's very popular.
Yeah, as we're talking about two brothers, galvanised by David Safer. David wrote a lot of Leeds United books. In fact, he wrote the autobiography with Alan Clark, amongst others. Tale of two football brothers, Chris and Tony Galvin, with contrasting fortunes. That looks like it's going to be a good book by David. And Colin Abbott, his latest book is out either now or shortly. Charlie Aiken's autobiography. And I know Colin is a pal of mine, and he's been working on this book for a long time. And Colin has written so many Villa books, it's untrue.
Yeah.
And what happens, again, talking about the Football Times guys, you put things on the back burner, then you go back, and he's gone back, and he's finished it now with Charlie. And we did mention legends of football clubs, and Charlie Aiken does sit nicely in that category of being a legend of Aston Villa Football Club. And New York Cosmos, of course.
Yes, absolutely. But other books that's coming out as well. Should I mention some books that's coming out very soon, just along that lines? You've got. I'll skim over this because it's 1992. But it's it calls it the birth of modern football, which I guess is true, really. The birth of modern football.
Skip that one.
One thing I will mention is when I shared that, because I always share about books that's coming out, whether it grabs my attention or not. But I shared it on Twitter. I've never seen so many comments. It creates a lot of debate when I shared that on Twitter, similar to your response as well. So, the birth of modern football. I guess Rob Fletcher's wrote that book. He's literally just, he's just. You can't blame him. It's not him that changed football. He didn't introduce, Sky. He's just literally decided to write a book about that first year kind of thing. So, and everyone could talk about how it's changed after that, and not for the best, of course.
Do you know what I do,
down to everyone's opinions, but
when
at least he wrote a book about it, and some people who have never written the book,
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I mean,
that was his subject. It decided, but it created a lot of debate.
It's a book I would never read because I'm not interested in that. But I would never comment in a derogatory manner because good luck to everyone. So you share lots and lots and lots of books through your Facebook and Twitter sites, and I will then retweet and share the books that you share that I like, because what you do is you're given books. So you're given books and you put them out. This is what our football podcast is about. We talk about football books that are coming out. Some books that I like, some books that I don't, but I don't dwell on the ones that I don't because I skip and I move on. But I would never comment in a derogatory manner. I just look at the books I like, focus on what I like, and share what I like. And forget.
Yeah, exactly that.
And just skip the ones that don't really take me fancy. But, some of the books that don't take you fancy could be some of the best books that you've never read.
You're spot on. There's many of, as you know, I'm a Nottingham Forest fan, but some of the best books I've read is about other clubs.
Absolutely.
I could think of some great books I've read about Rochdale, and believe me, I've got no link to Rochdale whatsoever.
Yeah.
But there's some brilliant books written by Rochdale by a guy called Mark Hodgkinson.
That was that season in the winter, wasn't it?
Yeah, the longest winter.
Yeah.
But that's just another example, I guess. There's books about clubs that I don't necessarily follow, but they're brilliant stories.
Yeah.
And some of the best books, exactly as you've said, are not necessarily books I would have necessarily thought, well, there you go. But again, I think that's what I've always been a champion of reading anyway, as you well know, for these podcasts. But I think it helps you build your knowledge of football.
Of course it does.
And you appreciate, because we all live in that little bit of a bubble. Certainly you see on Twitter a meltdown when your club's lost one game, even though they probably won the 10 games previous. 2's left with 1. The club's rubbish. We need, get rid of the manager. And it's a meltdown. And every fan's exactly the same. And then once you realise you read books about other clubs, you kind of, oh yeah, they're like us as well at West Ham, at Birmingham, at Leeds. We're all the same. We've all got our own passions, kind of thing, but we've all got different stories, and that's what's fascinating about it, isn't it?
Absolutely.
Like, from the past to the present, isn't it? So, and the one that I'll mention that as well, I'm moving on quickly on, is there is the story of the Potteridge derby. El Serium, I can't get this pronounced right. Serimaco by Liam Bullock. So it's the story of Stoke City, Port Vale. It talks about, obviously it's a rivalry for obviously people in that area. It's again linked to whatever area, it's important to you, isn't it? But all good rivalries require history, it's territorial conflicts, exciting incidents, passionate fans, etc. And this one, explores that history of that, with first-hand accounts telling the story of a rivalry like no other. So I think Liam Bullock is the author. I think he's from the Stoke City side. I'm sure he is, because I've read a couple of his books. But that's one, that's coming out in March.
And of course, Stan Matthews is the manager of Port Vale.
Yeah.
So there's the link. And Brian Little was going to sign for Stan. Stan wanted Brian to sign at Port Vale. Then he got the sack, and Brian went to Aston Villa, fell in love with Villa, and signed at Villa Park. But Stan was a former player of Stoke City that managed at Port Vale. Yeah,
excellent. Another book that's coming out is called Field of Dreams by Nige Tassel. Nige Tassel's another great author who's written a number of excellent books. One of my favourite ones called The Bottom Corner, which is based on non-league football. But The Field of Dreams, it's about 100 years of Wembley in 100 matches.
Ooh, that's good.
Yeah, it's really good and really great author. And straight away, it's going to be a good book. But it includes everything. One of the first ones he talks about in the synopsis is the 1923 FA Cup final, the White Horse final.
Yeah.
Which you remember, the first football match played at the British Empire Exhibition Stadium, as it was known then. But it goes through, a number of games, 100 matches. So I'm sure games I'd be amazed if 1966, for example, is not included in there. But I know it also includes the FA Cup final when Bert Troutman broke his neck.
Yep.
Famously, in playing for Manchester City against Birmingham, wasn't it? Yeah, that's it.
Part of Hitler's youth, wasn't he?
Yeah, that's it, which is, again, a fascinating book on its own as well. A fascinating documentary as well, if you ever get a chance to see it. Yeah, that's Field of Dreams. So about, 100 years of Wembley and 100 matches. So it'll be interesting to see what 100 matches he's chosen. But
interesting.
either way, I'm sure it'll be an interesting read. There's authors out there that can, I don't know, they could write a shopping list and make it sound exciting. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So, if you're a good author, you can make anything sound good.
Yeah.
I just wish I could. And then another one that's coming out in March is called Divided Cities. It's got a link a little bit to the derbies I've been talking about, but this one's about the world's most passionate single city derbies. So rivalries everywhere in football, isn't it? So, but it's about derbies from across all the cities on Earth, basically. It's a rich history of our clubs, etc. And that's again coming out through Pitch in March. that particular one. So, yeah. And then, into April, if you want me to carry on, there's another one that's coming out, which again linked to derbies, which I seem to be talking about. It's called the Cross in the Park, and it's the men who dare to play for both Liverpool and Everton.
Yes, I've seen that featured,
yeah, that's it. So some of the players that have done that. Across the bridge, Peter Beardsley is one of them, springs to mind. Manager-wise, you've got Rafa Benitez, which
Gary
went down well.
Ablett as well. Gary Ablett played for both. Steve McMahon played for both.
Yeah, Nick Barmby, if I remember.
Yeah, I
he
think
was one
Nick
of them
Barmby
as well.
played for both, didn't he? Played for Spurs as well. Yeah, there's when you sit down and you think about it, there's probably quite a lot that I believe Kevin Sheedy actually was a Liverpool player that went to Everton, wasn't he? I think Sheed started his career at Liverpool.
Yeah, you think you might be right,
I don't think he played many or any games, but I'm sure he played at Liverpool and then he moved over Stanley Park to Everton at Goodison.
Yeah.
And Carragher was a red, wasn't he? Sorry, a blue that played played for Liverpool. So, families are split up there in Merseyside, similar to Birmingham, but it is what it is, isn't it?
I think Steven Gerrard, has he captured a picture of him wearing an Everton kit, I think, once?
Well,
when he was a kid?
Didn't Michael Owen's dad play for Everton?
I think there was something like that. I can't remember. There'd probably be people screaming down this now going, no, you're wrong, but I think you're right, yeah.
But I'm sure that Steve McManaman was a blue as well, that played for Liverpool. So it'll be a very interesting read, and we can actually read whether we were right or whether we were wrong.
Absolutely, then we'll know for certain.
3 games. 3 games in May. I want to mention Rob Carter. About Manchester United playing 3. I mean, they didn't just play 3 games in May in that season, but I think that those were the iconic games: the European Cup final, the last game of the Football League season, and the FA Cup final as well. But Rob has encapsulated all of that in a book, and again, I think very popular books these days are extracts and pieces from the supporters that were there and looking at it through their eyes. And I'm not sure if there's any players or managers that got involved, but it does look like a fascinating book. 3 games in May.
I've got that book too, with the forwards by Steve Bruce. So you've got some players involved in that. Yeah, absolutely. That's out through Morgan Lawrence Publishing.
Yes,
so Matthew there. Yeah, excellent. I think that comes out in May. Did you say? Is it May?
I would have thought so. March. I would have thought so because it is 3 days in May. So I think that I think it's already out now, but I think it's probably going to be the publication date when it's released would be in May. But I have seen it on his socials with various people holding the book up. So the hard copy is out now. But for those that are dropping through your door, your letterbox that you've paid for rather than contributed towards, that probably will drop in May.
Yeah, absolutely. Excellent.
What else we got, mate?
Well, another book that comes out in April is The Great Days of Sunderland. And it's subtitled of 6 league titles and 2 FA Cups.
Yeah, they did win a lot back then, didn't they?
Yeah, that's it. So a team of talents that dominated English football in the 1890s to the side that almost won the double in 1913. So the great team in the 1930s that challenged the riches of Arsenal, and the most recent success in the 50 years when second division Sunderland beat the mighty Leeds in the epic FA Cup final, of course.
Yeah, 1973.
So that looks it's a great read. Great. I love the cover of that one as well, I must admit. So it's a nice, simple picture on the front of celebrating at Wembley, and that's written by David Potter. So a nostalgic kind of trip down memory lane to Sunderland, for a hotbed of football, isn't it, up there? And you see Newcastle at the weekend. obviously in the League Cup final. And Sunderland, I think they're creeping up as well. I think they're up for potential promotion as well, aren't they? Coming back into the...
Yes, they're having a decent season.
Yeah, they're not doing too bad.
I don't think they're going to quite cut it this, but yeah, I mean they've come up from League One, made inroads into the Championship, got themselves in a competitive position, and who knows, with games running thick and fast now, and it's getting towards the serious end of the season. You never know. I personally think Borough will do it. Sheffield United, and of course Burnley are runaway leaders. But those are my three. But who knows? If it goes to the playoffs, it's an absolute lottery. So good luck to Sunderland, and let's hope that those great times return, because the Premier League or the First Division or whatever you want to call it needs a Sunderland as it has got a Newcastle these days, because as Sunderland were falling from grace in the 1890s, Newcastle were picking up the baton and running with it in the North East, wasn't they? They were one of the first super clubs of the world, Newcastle, and there's a great book that tells the story of those halcyon days.
They do, the great days. There was a book that came out, I think it was last year, actually.
Yeah, it was, yeah.
It was a book that I shared recently, 1904 to 1911. It's actually written by David Potter, the same author of that book I've just referred to.
Okay.
He wrote Newcastle United, so he obviously knows his stuff in that area. He's actually written many books. I've seen many of his books, actually. He's written, I think, not just football, actually, cricket as well. Rings a bell. But yeah, Newcastle United, they were... a football mad city, but they won the English League title 3 times in 5 years. The English, the FA Cup, and there's 7 near misses. And many of the players played for Scotland and England, etc. So it's another fascinating book about the tune.
Fantastic.
Up that way. So, one other I mentioned that came out last year is called The Big Deal. Fascinating book. I read it over Christmas, and what's fascinating is that it's 100 managers, and it talks about their greatest signing and the one that got away.
Oh, that's Richard Sydenham, isn't it?
Yeah, that's I see. You know him,
and Ragg.
And John Ragg, But what's amazing is the amount of people they managed to get for this book.
Yeah.
Some of the names they've got are stellar names. I'm on. Your modern day, you got your Jurgen Klopp's in there, but you got Kevin Keegan, Graham Souness, Brian Robson, Brendan Rodgers. And you've got Ron Atkinson. I love Ron Atkinson, which I've got here, actually. I've still got it highlighted. And like I say, it's about their best signing and their worst ever signing. And yes, you've got it. Mills. You've got it already.
David Mills is worst. David Mills is worst.
He's it's not the worst. It's the one that got away.
Oh, right, okay.
Sorry, that'll probably be good, actually. That'll probably be a follow-up book, actually. The worst ever signing.
It would be David Mills at West Brom. I remember Ron saying.
Did he say that?
He just bought the most expensive bus driver.
His big deal was Brian Robson, from West Brom to Man United for 1.5 million, which was record at the time. But the one that got away was Gary Lineker.
Right, okay.
He didn't manage to get Gary Lineker from Leicester City to Manchester United.
Butcher as well.
Butcher,
Butcher, that was one that got away.
Yeah.
Butcher was going to Man United. He'd primed him.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But there's some great names in it. There's great managers that picked out. John Barnwell, do you know that? Remember that
Barney.
Name,
yeah, Wolves.
Yeah, that's it. So his best ever one was Emin Hughes from Liverpool to Wolves.
Yeah.
But the one that got away, which stands out, Michel Platini from Saint-Etienne. So
I can't imagine Platini playing for Wolves.
No.
Somehow.
No. I think you're right there. That's something against the Black Country. But,
I mean, the biggest one that got away, although he was never there, was Zinedine Zidane at Newcastle United. Barry Siltman had offered Kevin Keegan Zinedine Zidane, and Kevin's team, someone from his team, went to watch ZZ, and Wolves were bottom of the Championship at the time, and the response come back from Kevin. Kevin didn't watch Zinedine Zidane, by the way. It was one of his team, and he said, we've had him watched, and in our opinion, he's not good enough to play for Wolverhampton Wanderers, was the reply.
I know, it's crazy, isn't
and
it?
he said, Kevin, you are making the biggest mistake ever. And Roberto Bettiga took him to Juventus, and I think within a couple of seasons, they sold him on to Real Madrid for 45 million. But I think Newcastle could have had him for about 5 million at the time.
Yeah, I'll mention another one then, Brian Little. So I'll tell you his best deal was Gareth Southgate. He's put in here. It was his best deal from Crystal Palace. But the ones that got away, I don't know if you know that from. He's picked up two actually. So Philip Cocu from PSV Eindhoven and Les Ferdinand. So he missed that one out from QPR at the time. So I think he went on to Newcastle, if I remember rightly. And didn't do bad there, Sir Les. He was known up there.
Yeah, good player.
So,
good player.
Yeah. So really good book though. Called The Big Deal. So 100 managers. You could go on and on. It's just really interesting looking at the best deals. Mark Hughes is another one that stands out. Because you forget that Vincent Kompany at Manchester City, because he was, arguably with the new Man City, let's say. But you forget Mark Hughes was the one that brought Vincent Kompany to Manchester City before he went off. But really good book, that one. So Richard Sideman, as you know, he's written a number of books on Villa as well, amongst others.
Absolutely, good writer.
Yeah, absolutely. So there's a number of other books that's coming out. So it's another fascinating month that's coming up in April, March and April. So
it never ceases to amaze me how many football books are written each month of each year. You just can't keep up, and it is a good job that there are people like you that promote them, because through you I've learned of so many different books, and some I've bought and not read. I can't say that there's some that I've bought and read, because I haven't. But I do add them to my library, and I think it's great. And there are football magazines that promote them. When Saturday comes, I've got a book corner in their pages, as Back Pass as well, and World Soccer magazine, and the publishers that keep publishing these great books, and the writers, the authors, the podcasters, etc., that just keep it alive and keep ticking over that knowledge of football, because no matter how much we think that we know about football, we actually don't know that much.
Yeah, absolutely. I think they do it for the love of the book as well. To say you're a published author, that's certainly something to tick off your bucket list, isn't it?
Something I will never ever say.
Yes, maybe I will one day, but
you might do. You might do. You could. You could write a football book. I mean, I couldn't. I'd struggle to string a sentence together.
Well, maybe you just need a good writer, Paul, and then.
I need a ghost.
You need a ghost writer, yes.
Yeah, I do, definitely.
Just write down what I said,
Absolutely,
But they don't do it for the love and the money. There's not books that you don't make a lot of money unless it's a really, classic seller. And even then, you're not going to make, you're not going to live off a book, let's say, like a J.K. Rowling in football terms. But what you create, as long as you cover your costs, etc., they just do it for the love of putting pen to paper. And thank you for the many doing that. And I don't know if it's just a coincidence since I've been doing this, but it does definitely feel like there's more books out than ever.
No, without doubt.
Which I'm certainly not complaining about.
Yeah, no, without doubt. How many books on average now are you being sent every month?
Ooh, that's a good one.
Has that grown?
Yes, it has. As I've come more the website's come more popular because I certainly, as you well know, I don't do it for any kind of money anything like that. It's very much a hobby, and I do it very much to promote authors. But I'm just looking here. I've got these 6 books I had this week. So 6 books this week. So it seems to pick up around about round about this time, March, April time, and then you have September, October, which coming up to the Christmas kind of period.
Mm-hmm.
They're definitely busy, but ever since it's just grown and grown, I get more and more requests. I get requests literally every day now, maybe a couple a day, from whether it's through Twitter, Facebook, or just through the website. Contact me. Would you be interested in, having a read of my book and or promoting it? I just haven't got round to. I can't literally read all of them. There's just, if anyone out there is thinking I read all of these, the ones I've just rolled off, I can't. These books there's definitely ones like you like the 1982 book. I will read that. Yeah, that's of interest to me. There is other books, and it's not necessarily it's a bad book, but I can skim through. I can skim read it quite quickly and get a gist of it, and move on. So, but any book and I'll say that to any authors who's listening out there, if you've got a book coming out, or you've had a book recently come out, just please get in touch. And I'm happy to at least promote it through the websites, through Twitter, and obviously promote it on our podcast as well that we do.
Absolutely, it's like the podcast that I make with the authors. I would struggle to read the book and then make the podcast. With Gary Edwards, The Summer of '63, Don Revie's Plan for Leeds United, I read at least half of that book, found it very, very interesting. I'm reading half of books because by the time I've actually started reading it, and then I'm making another podcast, and then I'm researching with the podcast, the time has elapsed, and I'm ready to do the podcast, and it's just impossible to keep reading all these books, because when you've got a full-time job as well, and it's just your hobby, you haven't got the time to do that. But, it is fantastic, because I don't know if you're like me, I just love to have the book. I love to look at the book. And even if I don't read it, I've got it in my library, and I just look at the book and I think, it's fantastic.
Yeah, I know exactly what you mean. I've got this, I'm in the process at some stage of having this a built-in kind of bookcase, purpose-built, and have all my books on it.
Have a word with my missus, so she can do one for me. I've got no chance, mate.
Oh, and I know. That's the because a lot of it's still in containers, in storage. So I just physically haven't got them. But one day, when I have a house that big, I could put it all on one wall. But I think, like you said, there's something about a book that just looks great, doesn't it?
You would need a castle for the amount of books that you've got. You'd need the West Wing, mate.
It's exactly. It's frightening. I think if I've read every book, I think this conversation with my wife, if I've read every book that I've got, every book that I've been sent over the last couple of years, I'd probably have to live to about 300 or something like that to read all of them.
I know.
So, it's just not possible.
It's frightening. And what I've tended to do more recently is just nail down and focus on the 70s, really.
Yeah.
And because you can, you get these books, you look at that book, you think, that's great, I want to read that, and you just don't have time. Be great to, wake up in the morning and think, I've got to read a book, I've got to research, I've got to do a podcast, and you could do that. But when you've got life and work that you have to get involved in, it makes it very, very difficult. So again, thanks to all that do produce these books. We do give it a mention on the podcast. We will reference, we will make podcasts, we will promote, but we unfortunately haven't got time to read all these books, but we will do our best for you, and we will reconvene in probably 4 weeks' time. We've got January and February out the way now, and this podcast will come out in March, so before the end of the football season, round about the end of probably middle to end of April, after Easter, we'll do another podcast promoting more books from myfootballbooks.com, Andy.
Thank you. Excellent.
Enjoy it. Thank you for your time, sir, and thank you all for listening. Until next time, I'll leave you with the 2 words that you always love to leave us with.
Yeah, happy reading, everyone.
Correct.
3 words, but happy reading.
Happy reading.
Bye all. Cheers, Paul.
Cheers, my cat. Ta-ra,
All the best.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Ta-ra,
Bye-bye.
bye-bye.